Now, there's been a lot of talk about vaccines of late when it comes to the coronavirus pandemic, a lot of hope. We've even had a debate about whether a coronavirus vaccine would be compulsory, and some people, led by Pauline Hanson, have already vowed that they won't be vaccinated. Hold on, we don't have a vaccine yet. So some people want to mandate a vaccine we don't have, and other people want to boycott a vaccine that doesn't exist. We may never have a vaccine. That's why we have to learn to live with the disease, because it won't be gone for a long while, if ever. But there was a big focus last week on Australia's deal to manufacture a vaccine, one that's being developed by AstraZeneca at Oxford University in the UK, should it be proven up, of course, should it be successful. The Prime Minister was talking this up in Parliament today.
The key to a post-COVID world has always been a vaccine. And there is hope.
Let's hope for the best here. Let's all hope a vaccine is developed as soon as possible. But we have to plan for the worst, of course. And let's listen to the latest comments from the Chief Medical Officer in the UK.
I would be quite surprised if we had a highly effective vaccine ready for mass use in large percentages of the population before the end of winter, certainly before this side of Christmas. Now, that may be wrong, and a lot of people are doing a huge amount scientifically and logistically to make sure that actually that's a pessimistic statement, to try and see if we can get a vaccine in extraordinarily fast speed. But we have to check it works, and we have to make sure it's safe. And these things do take time. So I think if we looked forward a year, I think the chances are much greater than if we look forward 6 months. And I just think we need to have that kind of timescale in mind.
OK, so even a year from now would be a godsend, which begs the question of whether we can live the way we're living in this country now for at least another year. The extent of overbearing rules in Victoria is just extraordinary, and it's getting worse. Victoria's Premier Daniel Andrews has actually intervened today to make an exception to his own government's rules, so that a 5-week-old baby of a man tragically killed at work can be at the funeral without taking a place from one of the 10 mourners allowed.
I just want to confirm that when it comes to the calculation of the 10 mourners for the funeral this Friday, the 5-week-old baby, who is a dependent, will not be counted as part of the 10, and we'll have some more to say about trying to broaden that rule out for all funerals for babies under 1 year. I think we're going to be able to land that, and as soon as we can, we'll confirm that for you.
Now, this is the right outcome in a terribly sad situation. But seriously? The Premier trying to land this as a decision? If you've ever wondered when you'd know there's too much government, too many rules, I would suggest that when a Premier of a state of 6.5 million people has to get involved in whether a baby needs to be counted as a mourner at his father's funeral, that might be the point. This shows the reach of an authoritarian or nanny state government has gone way too far, way too far. Yet Andrews today announced plans to extend his special emergency powers for another year.
Those sorts of rules are all a product of the state of emergency, and the provisions within the Public Health and Wellbeing Act need to be changed to reflect the fact that whilst we'd all love this to be over by the 13th of September, which is when the Act says the state of emergency must end, that's just not going to be the case. We're going to have this with us for a considerably longer period than that.
Now, the Liberal opposition in Victoria says it will oppose this extension, so there's a lot to play out in Parliament. Former Liberal Premier Jeff Kennett will share his views with me in a moment. He reckons Daniel Andrews has become a megalomaniac. But in the meantime, the Victorian government has called in celebrities to help lecture Victorians on their behaviour.
Wear a mask. If it's not on, it's just not on.
It's not the lockdown that's the enemy, it's the virus. And the sooner we obey the rules, the sooner this will all be over and we can get back to the stuff that really matters.
If it's not on, it's not on. So whack one on your face.
So stay home as much as you can, and if you do have to go out, make sure you wear a mask and wash your hands. We can win this race, can't we, buddy?
Yes, we can.
You know, this virus, it fights dirty. But if we play by the rules, we can give it a knockout blow.
Overbearing rules, drones in the sky, a government wanting more power for longer, and now patronising ads. Yet the crisis in Victoria was created by bungling government at quarantine, lax imposition of home isolation for infected patients, substandard infection responses at aged care homes, poor contract tracing by government, and confused and poor public messaging from government. 3/4 of all deaths have been in aged care facilities. Yet it's the citizens who are being blamed. It's Victorians who are being blamed and who are having their individual rights taken away. And they're supposed to be kept in check by silly ads from celebrities. If there is a vaccine, it'll be a long time coming. People should not accept the job losses, social chaos, suicides, poor medical care for other conditions, inhibited personal freedoms and mounting debt for our children without question for a day longer. Personal responsibility has to play a role, along with a reduction in government rules and restrictions. We need to do what we initially were told was the plan: flatten the curve, not pretend we can eliminate the virus. Look at the damage the COVID response has done already. Ask yourself how much worse it might be a year from now. And ask yourself what happens if we suffer all that for another year and then find out, as well we might, that the vaccine is still a long way off. Let's go to Geoffrey Kennett. I caught up with him in Melbourne just a short time ago. Jeff Kennett, thanks for joining us. Why should Daniel Andrews not have an extension of the powers that he's exercising now for another 12 months?
Because, Chris, today he has sent out a message to every business in Victoria and every potential investor from outside Victoria into Victoria that we're going to live under a state of emergency for another 12 months. Right now, our industry is closed, so much of it. Right now, our shops are for lease or for sale. Right now, our unemployment levels are rising. Regardless of what happens in the Parliament, the Premier has sent out a signal that there will be a state of emergency. That is his mindset. And if you're going to invest millions of dollars, you won't be investing in a state where the Premier is so terribly, terribly anti-business. And you know, Chris, I never thought I'd say this. John Setka runs the CMFEU down here. He's the only one, I think, who has any influence over the Premier. And I say to John Setka very, very clearly, you better get on the blower to the Premier pretty quickly. Because if he goes ahead with this, there won't be one of the CMFEU members who has a job next year. There will be no major construction sites. Those people will be joining the unemployment line. So something has got to give very, very quickly. Otherwise, Victoria is condemned in so many ways again to being a basket case.
So you're saying it sends out a very bleak picture to business and investors about an extended shutdown. What about to Victorians themselves? Any hope and aspirations, especially as you're seeing infection rates in the broader community fall down to very close to acceptable levels now?
Well, we're going to get there, and we're going to have to manage this virus. The Premier said today he might keep a state of emergency in place until we have a vaccine. We may never have a vaccine. We don't have a vaccine for SARS. So what's he talking about, for goodness sake? Name one other state that has curfews. Are we all going to be locked up at the whim of the Premier without any checks and balances? This is an act of a megalomaniac.
Well, that's a strong word, but this is the point here, isn't it? That even before...
Well, I don't think... Chris, I don't think I have ever called the Premier a name. I respect his office, and I've always called him Premier or Mr Andrews. But this is absolutely diabolical because of the message it sends out. I mean, some of these buildings here cost $4, $5, $1 billion. There'll be no more. There'll be no more jobs.
Well, you mentioned the word
I don't
megalomaniac.
understand
Do you suggest that Daniel Andrews is actually letting this situation get the better of him? He's not actually understanding the need for government restraint, for government not to impose rules on everybody. Victoria had the toughest rules of any state before the so-called second wave, so it obviously didn't help because states that have had a lighter touch have been more successful.
We have not been a state that has tried to live and manage with this virus. We've been a state that has imposed restrictions on people to the extent that individual freedoms are out the wall. Daniel actually said recently we mightn't be able to celebrate Christmas with our children and grandchildren. Well, let me tell him, the grandmothers of this state, armed with umbrellas, will walk to the houses with their children and grandchildren to celebrate Christmas. Now, instead of offering us hope, he's saying, oh, we're going to extend this state of emergency another 12 months. It can't happen, because if it does happen, there will be no Victoria as we know it today. And it's pretty bad right now. There is no hope here. And this Premier is driving us and our economy into the ground.
Can this be blocked in the upper house? Do you expect it could be blocked in the upper house? And while you're at it, is there a role for Canberra to step in here, for Scott Morrison to try and exert at least some moral influence, some rhetorical influence over what's happening in Victoria?
The upper house, the government obviously has control in the lower house. In the upper house, control is held by about 9 independents. They have a track record of voting with the government. However, that doesn't necessarily mean they will when this legislation comes to the Parliament, and I hope they join with the opposition in throwing it out. But even if they do, the Premier has sent out a message today: if you're thinking of spending money, investing in Victoria, don't, because I don't rate and value you. So in terms of the issue of upper house, we'll just have to wait and see. But I hope someone gets to the Premier pretty quickly indeed, because the damage has already started. There will be people in Sydney and Perth and overseas who have got investment programs on their deck, and they say, hang on, we're going to invest in Victoria. But God, there's going to be a state of emergency there for all of 2021. Well, we don't want to start investing in a state of emergency. So already the message has gone out.
So nothing for Scott Morrison to do here? His hands are tied behind his back?
Well, I don't know what he can do. We're a sovereign state. I mean, there's a lot of things I'd like to do right now, I can tell you, but I can't do any of it. A, because I'm a citizen. Secondly, I enjoy my curfewed freedom and I don't want to spend time in jail. But this is madness. This is absolute madness.
Jeff Kennett, thanks so much for joining us.
Great pleasure, Chris. Have a good day. Well, you're in Sydney, aren't you?
I am indeed.
Well, you're a very lucky man. Stay there, because the goons will get you down here.
Thanks again, Jeff.
Righto, Chris.
Jeff Kennett is right. We're very, very lucky in we Sydney-siders, just about anywhere in this country, really, compared to those in Victoria. I've got many loved ones in Victoria too, and I know it's pretty damn tough down there, and I think Jeff Kennett is speaking a lot of sense there. You've got to talk about hope, not crush people's aspirations at this time.